Greetings, everybody. I'm Jeremiah.
That's him.
She's Vania.
That's me. Welcome to another episode of the Beard and Curls podcast, where culture and creativity meets consciousness.
And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite platform for the latest, most exciting conversations anywhere.
You ready?
I'm ready. Cue that intro.
What's up, guys? It's your girl Margot Bingham.
Karen Parsons.
You're now tuned in.
You're now tuned in.
You are now tuned in.
You are now tuned in
to Beard and Curls.
Beard and Curls.
Beard and Curls.
Beard and Curls.
Beard and Curls. Keep it locked.
Our guest today is a licensed marriage and family therapist. However, you guys may know him best as the co-host of the Beard and Curls podcast. Jeremiah, welcome to your own show.
Happy to be here. Let's get it.
We have so much to get into today. Let's start with your journey to becoming a therapist.
Definitely. So my story, I would say, goes back to when I was about 26. And so I remember at the time I was working in corporate America, and I remember the daily grind, every morning, get in that train, pack like sardines. And I just knew that wasn't going to be the life for me. So if anybody knows anything about corporate America, a lot of times people have the goal of, I want to be able to climb that corporate ladder. I want to get that corner office, which sometimes could take like 25 years. And I just didn't feel like I was making a difference. I didn't really feel like I was really reaching anybody, and that wasn't the life for me. So for me personally, I had to do some soul searching. I was kind of like at a crossroads, and I was like, nah, I got to do something else. And so that's when I kind of searched within myself. And I remember at the time, I specifically asked myself 4 questions that kind of helped me arrive at the decision that I made. So one of those questions was, what is the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning? Mm-hmm. And so that usually speaks to something that you truly love. If you wake up and that's like the first thing you think about. And then the second question I asked myself is, what have others told me that I'm good at? And so I really wanted to kind of get a sense of like, okay, over the years, my conversations with people, friends, families, and things like that, what have people told me that they've noticed that I did well and I excelled at? And so I remember kind of asking that question. And then the next question I asked myself was, what would I be willing to do for free, even if I wasn't getting paid to do it? Mm-hmm. And that was something that made me think like, okay, so for me to do something, because, you hear the saying, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And
yes.
So that's kind of something that I knew, like, all right, so what would I be willing to do for free? And then the final question that I asked myself was, what's the happiest that I can remember being at any one point in my life? Mm-hmm. And so in asking all these questions, it just kind of brought me to the point like, okay, so I've been told that I'm a great communicator. I'm a great listener. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I need to be doing something where I'm helping people, maybe in a counseling capacity, because the last question really brought me back to when I was about 19. I was in my second year of college. Mm-hmm. I was actually going, bridge year, going from my first year to my second year. And I remember over the summer, I worked at this, summer program where I was literally like serving as a mentor to like, incoming freshmen. So like people who were like 18 years old, like maybe a year younger than me. And I just remember just how they responded to me. Like they were literally, people were crying on my shoulder and literally like crying to me about stuff that they were going through. And I remember how they felt supported by me. And I remember like, okay, so clearly there's something there for somebody to come to you and say, hey, I want to talk to you about some stuff that's going on in my life. So I just knew at that moment that it was only fitting for me to go into the field of counseling and really pursue a master's degree in marriage and family counseling. And that's kind of how the journey began.
Mm-hmm. What was it that you were struggling with the most? Was it the corporate environment, or was it the job that you were doing back then? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. And so I appreciate the question. I don't think it was as much as like the stuff that was happening around me with the job itself. It was just more so I didn't feel like I was truly reaching people in a meaningful, intangible way. Again, no knock on anybody. Like if you're in corporate and that's your thing, mm-hmm. It wasn't for me. I wanted to be able to really, truly impact people in a way where I felt like I was touching their soul, mm-hmm. where I was leaving my imprint on the world to where, long after I'm dead and gone, that legacy will live on long and live on strong. So that's kind of where I wanted to leave my imprint on the world, and that's not something I felt like I could have done in that environment. So I feel like before I really kind of got into the therapy and knowing like my core values, I feel like that's kind of like what I needed to do was to find something that aligned with my core values to really feel like I'm making a difference
Good. So let's dive a little bit into the work that you're doing. Can you describe what therapy means?
Okay. Yeah, and I appreciate the question. And so, in a nutshell, I'm a professional secret keeper. I get paid to keep secrets. No, I'm just kidding. Essentially, therapy is a journey. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a journey that is different every time. It's never going to look the same from one person to another, from one client to another. And that's part of the reason why I've been doing that for well over a decade, is because of the fact that it's never the same. And if it was, I probably would have quit a long time ago. It's like that old Forrest Gump saying, you know, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Well, that's kind of how I feel about therapy. So then really just knowing that I'm going to be able to help somebody through whatever situation and process that they're going through, and really just being a part of somebody's story, being a part of somebody's journey. And my role as a therapist is really simple. It's really just to guide somebody's process. You know, whatever decision they make, whatever direction they want to go in, my job is to really just support them in whatever that is. So like the analogy I like to use when I first start treatment with a client and we're like doing the intake session, I basically explained to them, like, my role is to really just be that conduit to help them get from point A to B. So like the analogy is like the client is in a car. They're the driver of that vehicle. And I'm basically like the GPS device in that vehicle. So the client could say, okay, I want to go in this direction. And it may not be the right direction, but at the end of the day, my role could be like, okay, so what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then the client could still decide to say, nah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. And it could take us a few months. It could take us up to years. And then the client may ultimately decide, like, you know what, I think I want to go in that direction after all. And then at that point, I'm going to work with them on being able to decide the best course of action to kind of get there. So a lot of times, you know, people think of therapy like the therapist is going to just tell you everything. It's going to give you all the answers. That's not how it works. And so at the end of the day, you know, we're going to engage with you. We're going to interact with you. But for the most part, you have the answers within yourself. And it's our job to kind of help bring that out of you, to kind of help you get the desired results that you want. And so my approach is very simple. It's strength-based. It's collaborative, and it's future focused. And so I use, you know, things that you already do well, things that, you know, can help in treatment to be able to help us reach your desired income. So my main thing is that, you know, I may be an expert in what I know, but at the end of the day, you're an expert on yourself. And we need both of those things to come together.
And how does it work for you? Because obviously you have different types of clients with different types of personality types, different types of needs, right? So some clients may want to, do more. Some clients may want less assignments. Like, how do you make sure that you provide the service that is customized to each client?
Well, that's a great question. And so you're right. Everybody doesn't come into it the same. And so I just got to be able to do some assessments early on. Like I usually reserve like the first 2 to 3 sessions, maybe even a little bit more than that, to really assess like what is needed. You know, like I'll do values work. I want to be able to find out what the client's values are. I'll learn a little bit about their personality types, you know, how they learn, you know, what's their learning style, you know, different things like that to really kind of help me customize a treatment plan that is specific and unique to that client. Because like I said before, it's not going to look the same for everybody. So wherever the client may be at, you know, whatever their readiness to do the work is, I want to be able to tailor the treatment to, you know, meet their needs or wherever they may be at in life.
What is it that you like the most about therapy?
Oh, man, that's a great question. There's definitely a bunch of stuff that I can say off the bat. But to start, I would say just being able to engage with cool people. I mean, there's a lot of people that I've gotten to meet through therapy that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to meet any other way. So I think for me, it's just that privilege of really just kind of connecting with people in all walks of life, you know, from various backgrounds, you know, colors, creed, and different things like that. So I feel like, you know, to me, that's an honor to be able to connect with these people. And then also just being able to be a part of somebody's story, you know what I'm saying? So for somebody to really allow you to be a part of their journey, you know, whatever that journey may be, and to say, you know what, I trust this person enough to help me get through where I want to get through, to kind of guide my process. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's not an automatic, it's not a given that, you know, you guys are going to connect, you're going to click. And so for somebody to trust you with that, to say, I want you to help guide my journey and guide my process, I think it's unique. So let me give you an example. It's like if I were to go to like the airport or like a coffee shop, and I see somebody sitting down, and I'm looking at them and I'm observing them, and I'm like, oh, this looks like a cool person. Let me go approach them, sit down, and just get to know them. Say, hey, I've been watching you. You're cool. I'm cool. You know what I'm saying? Let's just have a conversation. I got 45 minutes. You're on the clock. That person will probably look at me crazy, like, hey, security, come get this crazy man away from me. But because of therapy, somebody will allow you to do that. And I think that's an honor and a privilege. And so those would be some of the things that I would say I truly enjoy about being a therapist.
Okay. And what are some of the challenges that you encounter as a therapist?
That's a good question too. So obviously, like we just talked about, it's not always the case that you're going to have the right fit, because at the core of it, therapy is really about two things. It's about the client therapist fit, like does the client and the therapist gel, and then also the client's readiness to do the work. So if we don't vibe, I'll probably be able to pick up on that, and more than likely the client can pick up on that too. And then if I can also sense that the client is not truly ready to do the work, then it's like kind of like the old adage of leading a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it kind of thing. And the goal is not for me to make anybody do anything that they're not prepared to do. So if there's a lot of resistance from the client of them maybe not being ready to kind of do certain things, then that will reflect and maybe them not wanting to do homework and not really wanting to really do the work because they have to do the work. A lot of times it's not just me sitting with you for 45 minutes. The bulk of the work is done outside of session, outside of treatment. So the client has to be willing and ready to do that work. Another thing too is, as a therapist, one of the things that I truly enjoy, which I think kind of helps treatment, and if those things aren't present, then it could also make for difficult situations, difficult sled ahead, is as a therapist, you got to be available. And a lot of times we take that for granted. Like I've talked to certain clients where they'll tell me like, man, you're like the first person who answered your phone. And they'll be like, you're like the first person I've been able to get a hold of, or you're like the only person who called me back, or stuff like that. So that lets me know right there that if off the bat, you don't make yourself readily available to maybe answer a few questions, to do like a consultation, to put the client at ease, that could be a challenge later on. So I pride myself on always making myself available to being able to answer questions and make the client feel comfortable with the process, because it is a process and they may not know what to expect. They may not know what they're getting into. So my role is to really answer questions that maybe even they're not even thinking about, because a lot of times clients don't know what to ask a therapist when they call a therapist's office. So my role is to really put them at ease and to really let them know that I'm here. And even during the process, I'll always tell clients if they have specific things that come up throughout the week, to just like reach out. And if it's something that's not an emergency, I can try to help, provide support to them. And then the other thing that I think is also important is relatability. As a therapist, I want to be able to feel like, this client can connect with me on a human level. A lot of times, I don't know, I think I'm not trying to put, my cohort out there, but some therapists come about it where you can kind of see that there's a hierarchy, what I'm saying, where maybe the therapist is up here and the client is down here. And my role is to kind of bridge that gap, to create equality in treatment to where the client can feel like they're on an equal playing field. Because like I always tell clients, even if I'm here on this side, like I said, I'm an expert on what I know, but you're an expert on your life. So we need those things to come together. And just as I'm sitting on the side of the table doing this as a therapist, I could have easily been on the other side of the table where maybe there's something or several things that you're much better at me at, and you might be willing to provide me care and support around those things. So I look at all of those dynamics as being equal and important, because as a therapist, the most important thing you have to ask yourself is, would you come to see yourself? And if you can't answer that quick, fast, in a hurry, then it might be time to do something else. Because if I can not say without, beyond a shadow of a doubt, 100% that I would come to me, then I may need to start finding myself in a whole nother game.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I think it's so important for clients and potential clients to realize that they have the right to find the right fit. So not because they started with a therapist and they may feel obligated to stay just because they started, like it's their right to find a good match. And that is extremely important for the success of their long-term collaboration. So if the therapist doesn't mention that, then the client should know. So I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it's so important. Because I'm sure that there are certain people who might have been in a journey with a therapist, and if it if it wasn't like the right fit, they may say, oh, therapy doesn't work.
Exactly.
But that's not true.
Exactly. And I make it a point to tell my clients, and I appreciate where we're going with this, is even if you and I don't seem to be gelling, don't seem to be clicking, find another therapist.
Yeah.
I want you to get the support that you need, even if it's not from me, because at the end of the day, I may not be the right person to help you get to where you need to get to. I could be doing something, or I could be doing nothing that could be distracting you. And at the end of the day, I don't want to get in the way of your process, of your journey.
Yeah.
And so I need to be able to let clients know that. And it's like, think of it like this. It's like shopping for shoes.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a store and you find a shoe and you try it on, and it's like maybe a size, less than what you normally would wear. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, you're not going to walk around being uncomfortable if it does not fit. So at the end of the day, you have to be able to feel comfortable, because people are getting into some real intimate and personal stuff. And if you don't feel comfortable with the person that you're sitting across, it's going to be hard to really be open and vulnerable.
Exactly. And in addition to finding the right size, you have to find the right style and type of shoe. Because if you're going to a wedding and you're shopping at a sports store, then you may have the right fit, that size, but not the right shoe after all.
That's a very good point.
So I think that's equally important for the potential clients to realize that every therapist has a different background, a different specialization. So you have to do your research and really take that into consideration.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And so, like you said, different therapists have different theoretical orientations. And it's like me personally, like I used to be primarily in the beginning more solution focused, narrative therapy, which is more postmodern. I've since kind of like transitioned more to being more like a cognitive behavior therapist, more of the cognitive therapies, like CBT, dialectical behavior therapy and stuff like that. So all of these different things help, treat different things. And so you want to be able to identify, like, okay, like when you call a therapist, like, what is your theoretical orientation? Which framework do you typically use for treatment? And how can I help with my presenting concerns? So all these things are important to really not only find the right fit, but the right style that works for you.
Yes, that's true. So let's say somebody wants to have to find a therapist because they're struggling with anxiety, right? So you're talking about theoretical orientation and stuff. Like, where can somebody like find that information in order to understand when the therapist say, oh, I'm using this or that? Like, can they just Google it? Like how does it work? Because
I mean, at the end of the day, even if you didn't know which specific orientation, was significant for you, just the fact that you're asking that question, the therapist then knows that, okay, this person knows at least what to ask me. And more often than not, the therapist will be able to explain the different orientations and which one that they specialize in. So that way they'll know, like, based on what you're presenting with, like, maybe this might not be a good fit. Like, let's say somebody has like stuff going on in their childhood, where maybe they have, problems connecting with like a caregiver. You know what I'm saying? So now we're getting more into like psychoanalytic, psychodynamic stuff, where maybe we're dealing with some object relations, and those kind of therapies. And so you want to be able to know, like, is the therapist that I'm working with, is that person trained in this area? Do they specialize in that? Can they help me with that? If you're dealing with like anxiety, depression, then some of the cognitive theories, can help with that. Like CBT, like I mentioned, DBT, those type of theories can help with that.
So what are you specialized in and why?
Okay, great question. And so I pretty much treat various things, that clients present with, like from anxiety, depression, stress, anger, communication, relationships, trauma, things like that. Pretty much tier 1 type, stuff, non-emergency types services. If it were to escalate, beyond that, like tier 2, tier 3, where we're talking about hospitalization or residential care treatment, then I would obviously refer the client out to the appropriate care, as that would go beyond my scope of practice. But at the core of it, I would say anxiety is the thing that I specialize in the most. And part of the reason why I specialize in anxiety is because it's common. It's often, anxiety and depression are often referred to as the common cold of mental health care. And part of the reason why it's often referred to as that is because I would say 18% of the population is diagnosed, of the adult population is diagnosed with anxiety. So that's roughly about 40 million, adults who are diagnosed. And that's just what we know of.
You mean in the U.S.?
In the U.S. And so a lot of times, people are walking around undiagnosed or self-diagnosing and stuff like that. So just from the statistics alone, we know that it's probably, more than that. And so for me, it's important to be able to, help clients who struggle with that to be able to manage that, because it's not something that you can cure. So let me just kind of be clear on that. Anxiety is not a disease that you cure. You just have to help manage that, because at the end of the day, anxiety is no different than any other emotion that we have as people. So it's just really being able to understand how to manage the intensity of it, because there's good anxiety and there's bad anxiety. Mm-hmm. So being able to understand the difference, because even with what we're doing right now, we have to kind of, prepare, and with the podcast, when I'm getting ready to go meet with a client, you prepare. So all these different things is because of anxiety. So we need a little bit of anxiety to be able to perform and do our jobs and, perform at a high level. Without that, we wouldn't be able to get anything done. But it's when it becomes too intense to where you start to think the worst and you feel like everything is going to go wrong. That's when we need to be able to bring it down a notch and to manage that. And the good thing is that with CBT, with cognitive behavior therapy, and some other theoretical orientations, we can easily help manage anxiety to where, someone can, function and go about their lives.
Mm-hmm. So you give some examples about good anxiety. Like, can you give some examples about bad anxiety?
Yeah. So a little bit about the bad anxiety. It's basically when you start to think the worst. Basically the anxiety, the definition of anxiety is intense fear or worry, right? And so a lot of times, we start to think the worst case scenario, like maybe a situation might not warrant that. They might not, rise to that level of intensity, but in our mind, we think that. And so when we talk about fear, we know there's two types of fear. There's situational fear and there's psychological fear. So with situational fear, it's pretty much what it sounds like, so basically you're in a situation, maybe your life is in danger. Maybe there's like a wild dog at night or something like that in the dark.
Or a coyote.
It could be a coyote too. There's definitely coyotes running around here in Southern California. And so being able to know, like, okay, so this is a dangerous situation. How do I remove myself from that situation expeditiously and not necessarily take chances with trying to figure out how the situation might go? You just kind of make a run for it and just hope for the best. And so that would be classified as situational fear. Self-preservation, save yourself, get out of there. Understandable. But with psychological fear, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. Your mind is basically, the anxiety has basically triggered that fight or flight response or freeze. And so you're basically thinking that, okay, I need to do something, but in reality, there's really nothing going on. It's kind of like that saying, it's like all dressed up and nowhere to go. So it's like you're thinking that something should be happening. And neuroscientific research has kind of already told us why that is. And so the amygdala, which is that part of the brain that kind of serves as like that fear brain, or like they call it sometimes a threat detector, that thing gets turned on and it remains on. And so that's why the person is always on high alert, like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And so that fear brain, that amygdala is turned on. So imagine like having a smoke detector in your home and that smoke detector goes off. Naturally, you're going to get up thinking, okay, where's the fire? So like you're going to look for it, and then you might see smoke or you might actually see a fire, and then you have to react to that. But imagine if that smoke detector was on all day long and there was no fire. So that's kind of like what the anxiety is that amygdala is a little bit wired too tight. And so with some of the treatments and different things like that, some of the exercises with, CBT, you can kind of help, rewire that brain to where we can kind of turn off that amygdala, so it's not always, on high alert, thinking that there's a situation that's bad that's causing you to feel a certain way, where there's no danger present. So, so that would be like kind of like what that is with anxiety.
Okay, and how long does it take for a client to learn to control that?
It's different for everybody, and so a lot of it is just really just putting into practice, some of these techniques, some of these different things that you can work with your therapist on. And so like I know with like CBT, one of the things that I work with clients on is basically challenging unhelpful thoughts, like cognitive distortions. Basically the things that we often don't realize are thinking traps, like, all or nothing thinking, black or white thinking, catastrophic thinking.
Always and never.
Things like that. And so being able to challenge that, like when those things are happening, to know like, oh, okay, I'm engaging in the thinking trap. This is a cognitive distortion. So being aware of what you're fighting usually gives you the best chance to kind of overcome it. So that way you're more aware, you have more presence of mind. There's obviously some breathing exercises, some calming techniques, some grounding activities. And so there's definitely a lot of things that, a therapist can work with a client on to kind of help, overcome some of these cognitive distortions and those things that make you think the worst case scenario.
So let's say somebody is experiencing anxiety, like right now, right? And they're listening to this. Do you have any tips, like something that they could start practicing, like right now, today?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the question. And so when we're talking about anxiety, again, we're talking about like a future state. Whereas like depression is like something in the past that maybe you're struggling with. So seeing that it's based on worry and fear and something future state, one of the things that you can ask yourself is, where's the threat? Always ask yourself this question: where is the threat? And if so, what is the evidence to support this threat, to support this thought? So if you ask yourself that question and you can't really think of like I said, like a dog is chasing you, then more than likely you're operating under psychological fear. And that's where you have to start trying to do some of the things that we talked about, like really just being mindful about what's happening within yourself. And so like if we're just kind of breaking down emotions, right? And like I mentioned, anxiety is an emotion. And so emotions, as we know, consists of three things, like your thoughts, your feelings, and the physical sensations, right? So the physical sensations. And so at the end of the day, you want to be able to ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? What am I feeling? And then more importantly, what am I doing? Because we know our thoughts give rise to our feelings, and our feelings dictate our emotions, our behavior. So being able to kind of know that every single emotion that we have starts with a single thought. So asking yourself, what is that thought right now? Where is it coming from? And is it supported by any actual evidence? And that's kind of like a way to kind of start thinking about this in a different way, is to really seeing where is this coming from? What is the basis for that? Is it supported by facts? Because as you know, as a coach, thoughts are not facts. Opinions are not facts. So ask yourself simple questions. Is this a fact or is this an opinion? Is this an actual fact or is this a thought? And then being able to differentiate between the two, I think, is a good way to kind of start managing that effectively.
So let's break it down a little bit. Can you come up with a very common example for anxiety that people have?
A lot of it could maybe just be like in public settings.
Okay.
Or maybe people think about like other people's thoughts about them, or maybe thinking the worst about a situation, or maybe even if you had like a situation where you said something that you thought was weird or awkward, and you think that other people are gonna just hold on to that like it's the worst thing they've ever had in their lives. And so we sometimes hold on to these things, or we think certain things that we cannot even prove, but we hold on to them for dear life. And that's kind of something that perpetuates that anxiety. So a lot of it is around other people and stuff like that too.
Okay, so let's say somebody said something in a meeting and is worried, or like you said, that intense worry or fear that maybe what he or she said was not taken in a well way, So so the next step would be like to analyze, is this an opinion or is this a fact, right?
Exactly.
So is it an opinion? Like, is it my own opinion that I messed up, or am I having all these thoughts unnecessarily?
Exactly. And one way to kind of counter that, and I appreciate the question, is to then start asking yourself, again, we're talking about future state. Like, what if this person thought this? What if they, this and that? What if they talk about me after this meeting? What if they, I didn't, all of these are just what if thoughts, right? And so because we don't have the facts, one of the things that you can say right off the bat is, okay, so I don't know what this means, but I will deal with it when we get there, when we cross that bridge. That's one of the ways to kind of counter these what if thoughts. It says, whatever the situation may present itself to be, we will deal with it when it gets there. And really just change your breathing in that moment, because we may not be able to control some of these other things, but there are things that we can control, like our breathing. So just think a little bit deeper about how your breathing is going. Say, okay, all right, so I cannot control what's going to happen from here on out. But let's say somebody does have something that they want to say. If in fact they do have something that they bring to me, we will deal with it at that time. And really start thinking, okay, the worst case scenario, but it say, okay, is that really, truly the worst thing that could happen if it were to happen. And then being able to say, okay, if that did happen, I could, deal with it that way. But the best thing is to really just not worry about things that haven't happened yet or that may never happen. It says, if and when it does happen, we will deal with it then.
No, that's true. And also, I think a lot of times the anxiety arises because a lot of times people have fear of failure too, right? So if you're worried about what other people think about what you said, it's because you're worried that you didn't do a good job, that you were experienced as a failure or stuff like that. So if you kind of like reframe your thoughts around failure or when something doesn't go the way you hoped it would go, like if you see it as an experiment or you see it, you see it as a way of doing things and you always have an opportunity to do it in a different way, then that mindset shift will help yourself when you are in situations where maybe you can just say you're growing, right? So somebody can experience the exact same thing but go about it in a different way based on their mindset.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. You hit it on the nail. And then to add to that is also, again, asking yourself, like, when it comes to anxiety, is it a bad thing? So just knowing that our emotions, are, neither good nor bad, right? They just kind of are, so that's the basis of emotions. They just are what they are. So like we have 4 primary basic human emotions. We have joy, we have fear, we have sadness, and we have anger, which could be both a primary and a secondary emotion. Right?
Joy, fear, sadness, anger.
Right. Those are.
Why is only 25% positive?
That's a great question. And so a lot of times people would say, well, look at what we have to work with. Only 1 out of the 4 is good. So we're kind of screwed. But no, not exactly. So like I was getting ready to say, like, the emotions are neither good nor bad. Just like if I were to ask you, like, when was the last time you were truly happy? You'd probably have to pause and think, because what's happening is when we're happy, we're not thinking at all. We're just kind of in the moment. We're taking it in. And then before you know it, that emotion runs its course. And so as that happens, you're just kind of making room for the next emotion. So, but with the other 3, anger, fear, and sadness, we don't like the way these things make us feel. So we sit with them longer. We wrestle with them. And therefore, they stay with us a little bit longer than they need to. It's kind of like that revolving door. If like 2 people are trying to get in there, they're going to be all squeezed up and it's like jockeying, like, let me through. But if one at a time goes in, then the person goes, they leave, and the next person comes. So that's what our emotions are intended to do. We're supposed to just experience the emotion. If we don't like it, just say, what, I feel kind of sad right now. I didn't do too well at the meeting. I would have liked to have done better at the meeting. It didn't go as well as I wanted to go. And just say that. Say that out loud to yourself and just acknowledge that, what, I don't know if I'm going to feel like that in the next 5 hours or the next 5 days, but this is how I feel right now.
Yeah.
And that will help the person to be able to, deal with the fact that, okay, how can I then approach it differently in the future? You talked about growth, and part of that growth is maybe you need to plan a little bit differently. Maybe you need to plan better, because that's one of the ways to offset anxiety is to have a plan for how you're going to approach something and how you're going to prepare for something. And that can help you, go through the situation feeling like, okay, did I do everything that I could? And at the end of the day, I'm still going to grow. I'm still going to learn, but I know I did my best.
No, that makes sense. By the way, I still don't like that it's only 1 out of 4. I think it needs to be adjusted.
I know you're going to have to talk to somebody else about that. I feel you.
So let's switch it up a little bit. What are some of your pet peeves when it comes to therapy?
Oh, man, don't get me started on that one. And so as a therapist, I hear a lot of stuff. And a lot of times when I hear stuff, I have to kind of like cringe, like, that's not what that is. And so one of them for sure is, a lot of times you hear people say, oh, you're so OCD. You're so OCD. And if anybody knows OCD, we're talking about obsessive compulsive disorder, right? And so like a classic example of OCD is like Monk. If you remember the drama series Monk.
Of course.
And so obsessive compulsive detective. So he was a classic case of OCD. And like even going further back to like Bill Murray, he in that movie What About Bob, which came out in the early 90s. That was another classic case of somebody being OCD. And so when you think about OCD, it's not even so much as the obsession as much as it has to do with the compulsions. And when we're talking about compulsions, that's that repetitiveness, right? That's that repetitive behavior of like washing their hands like 20 times.
Yes.
Or maybe going out and coming back in 50 times because you think you left the stove on. That's what the OCD part is. But a lot of times when people say that, they're more so referring to somebody who's a perfectionist, somebody who likes to have things a certain way, who maybe want things their way, or who feel like if they don't do it, then it's not going to get done right, or nobody else can do it as well as them. That's more or less what people are referring to. So instead of OCD, what they truly mean is OCPD. And so that's the one that we don't always hear about, but that's exactly what they're referring to. It's that perfectionist. That's what that P is that OCPD that they're referring to. So it's not even so much the OCD as much as it's the perfectionist part.
Okay, so the P stands for perfectionist?
No, it's obsessive compulsive personality disorder.
Okay.
But you can interchangeably use the perfectionist because that's really what that is. It's somebody who knows exactly what they want, how they want it, and they don't like other people messing with that. So that's definitely one thing for sure. And then the other one that I always hear that I don't know if I'll ever get used to it is people who say, oh, this person is a sociopath. Or this person, there is no such thing as a sociopath in any DSM that I've ever looked at. The actual disorder is antisocial personality disorder. See, that little social part is where you get that sociopath. And so if we know anything about antisocial personality disorder, we're talking about somebody who's a common criminal, who's able to, basically navigate through society, basically has no regard for human life, no empathy whatsoever, does not care about your feelings. And so that's what we're talking about. But a lot of times, I hear sociopath, and I'm thinking, no, you mean antisocial personality disorder, which, as we know, the root of it is, disruptive behavior disorder, where we maybe see as young as between the ages of 5 to 9, where maybe a little kid, maybe in, preschool or in the first grade, kindergarten, they walk around and maybe they kick another kid, doing stuff like that. So we start to see that early on, and then that graduates into oppositional defiant disorder, like between the ages of like maybe 11 to 14, where, they're very defiant. They can't be told what to do. They start talking back to teachers and parents and different things like that. And then that graduates into like conduct disorder, where maybe the kid starts to involve in criminal behavior, where maybe fire setting, graffiti, things like that. And then, so that's usually around the ages of 15 through 18. So antisocial personality then comes from all of that. When you kind of observe and you see these things over the years, that can, graduate and become antisocial personality disorder. And then the other one that I also think about along the lines of antisocial personality is a lot of times people who don't like to be around people will say, oh, I'm antisocial. Thinking, no, you're not. You're not a criminal. You may prefer to do your own thing. You may prefer to keep to yourself. But a lot of times people always say stuff like that. And I'm always thinking, nah, I don't think you are at all. I don't think you want to be labeled as a criminal. You just don't like to be around people. That person would more so be what we call a schizoid. And that's somebody who is a loner. They prefer to be alone. They like to work alone. Maybe for the most part, they do their best work alone. And that's what they want. They're not lonely at all. That person is a loner. And so that's more like a schizoid more than anything.
So that's how they want to be. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier sociopath, like that is not in the DSM, right?
Not at all.
So where does it come from? And can you also explain what a DSM is for those who don't know?
Definitely. I appreciate that. So to be clear, the DSM is a diagnostic statistical manual, diagnostic statistical manual. And that's basically, you often hear therapists refer to the DSM as like the Bible. And that's basically where we get all the disorders and all the diagnosing that we get to be able to say, okay, I'm going to diagnose this person with X, Y, Z. So as clinicians, you have to have, that's one of the first books you're going to get in grad school. That's one of the things that you're going to have at your practice. You want to always have that handy. So that's a way for you to be able to say, okay, if I'm going to diagnose this person with X, Y, Z, this is the criteria. These are the things that I can see that are consistent to where I can feel comfortable giving this person this diagnosis. And so as far as the sociopath, again, that derives from antisocial personality disorder. But on its own, that's not in any DSM that I've seen.
Okay. Maybe it's coming in the next DSM.
Possibly. I mean, we're up to 5 and we've been doing this now for a while and it hasn't been added in there yet. So who's to say if it'll ever get added? But I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. Every time they come out with a different version, they add different things.
Changes.
And sometimes they remove different things. So
we'll
see.
So we're going to look for it in the next DSM to see if it comes in.
Okay. For sure. I'll keep you posted on that.
Thank you. What are some misconceptions that people have about therapy or therapists?
It's a great question. Like I mentioned earlier, like a lot of times people refer to therapists as shrinks. I don't know if I use that exact term, but a lot of times when you think of a shrink, it's like somebody whose job is to make somebody feel smaller. So a lot of people will say, I don't want to see a shrink, because they're in their mind, they're already thinking that this person is going to be condescending. They're going to maybe try to make them feel small, and they're going to try to, psychoanalyze them. And, it's just stuff that has never been proven to be true. And so at the core of it, we can't read minds. Therapists are not mind readers. A lot of times people may think that therapists can read minds. We can't read. We can only go off of what we get, the information that you provide us. We have the ability to be able to observe behavior, body language, and things like that. But at the core of it, we go off of what you give us. But one of the things that I'll often hear, the misconceptions, is that it's for crazy people. Like if you go to therapy, you must be crazy. There's got to be something wrong with you. And some of that might also be cultural as well, where maybe certain groups might not be as open to it because they think, and that's part of the work that we constantly have to do, is to continue to educate people, doing that psychoeducation about what therapy really is all about, and really just being open to knowing that it's another form of support that you might be able to get. Oftentimes we hear people thinking about therapy like in the standpoint, like maybe they're going to be laid up in somebody's couch. Like they're going to come to my office and they're going to be laid out and they're going to have their hands like this, and I'm just going to be sitting over them and I'm going to be taking notes and stuff like that. So a lot of times people get a little bit, stressed out thinking at the idea that they're going to be laid up on somebody. I've been doing this for a while. I've never had anybody laid up on any couch that I've been around. And so that's not the case at all. You just have to be able to come and see for yourself. A lot of times, you hear things like, people are looking for attention. You know what I'm saying? They're seeking attention. Like, what's wrong with you that you need to go talk to somebody else? Like, a lot of times, I've had people come to my office and say their parents or caregivers will say, well, why do you need to talk to a therapist? You just want attention. So there's a lot of that too. And then also another thing that I sometimes hear too is that if you go to therapy, you're weak. You know what I'm saying? It's for weak people. Like, you're not strong enough to work on your own stuff. You're not strong enough to be able to overcome your own problems. You have to go get assistance somewhere else. So you're weak. And so those are some of the things that, I often come across. And then also, like, for couples, one of the things that they often do is they view therapy as like a last resort. And so they try to work on everything on their own. And they say, okay, you know what? If this doesn't work, if we can't get this done, then we're going to go to therapy. And then if we can't get through that successfully, then we're going to break up. So therapy is not supposed to be a last resort.
Yes.
You're supposed to be able to go into it with an open mind, knowing that it can help you.
Yes.
And that it's not just something you're doing to see if you can keep yourself together.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you believe that your mental health is as important as your physical health, you need to treat it that way too, right?
Exactly.
So if you break your leg and somebody tells you, oh, you're weak if you go to the doctor to fix it. Are you kidding me? So are you going to believe I need to fix my leg myself? I need to heal my broken leg myself because if I cannot do it, then I'm weak? Doesn't make any sense,
Absolutely right.
So if we value our mental health as much as we value our physical health, it needs attention too.
Spot on.
Whether it's preventative or whether it's like when you're going through something, whenever it is. Like, I think you're actually strong if you seek help.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, So here again, we're talking about a whole mindset shift, and I know that, there has been a lot of efforts towards bringing awareness when it comes to mental health. There is still stigma, but
A lot of stigma.
I mean, I've seen progress over the years, but I think there's still like a lot of work to be done. But I think like those people who do get therapy, I think they can be the best advocates for what it represents.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like if you talk about it with confidence and you have a good experience, like you can inspire other people that may be, doubting whether they should do it or not.
Exactly. No, I'm with you. And like if a kid, like a 5-year-old, gets a cut, you teach them to put a Band-Aid on there.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, they don't want to be infected. You teach them that. The same way you teach people to brush their teeth.
Yes.
Because they don't want to go around offending anybody. It's the same way you say, you feel down, you feel depressed, seek treatment. And maybe that's something that could be taught in the schools.
Yes.
And really make it a push for that to be more normal. And that needs to start very early in life.
Yeah, I think if this is taught in schools, it will definitely be normalized, because then, I mean, it's like what they learn and then it becomes
Exactly.
normal.
It becomes like everyday life. So I agree.
Yeah. So what hidden talents do you have that people don't know about?
All right, that's a good one. I think one of the things that maybe I've shared this in passing with others throughout the years is my ability to cut hair. You know, I've been cutting my own hair now for the better part of like 16 years. You know, I just got to the point where I got tired of going to the barbershop. It just wasn't for me anymore. It wasn't my scene. So I really got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I have patience. You know, I have precision. I think I can do this myself. And I really started, you know, messing around with that. And I've been able to do that for myself. Like if I'm home, I'll cut it for my father and different things like that. Like I just enjoy that. And maybe one day I will pursue it where I can maybe combine the both, where I'll have somebody in the chair and I'll ask them questions as though I was doing therapy while I'm cutting their hair. So who knows?
Exactly. You can be a therapist in a barbershop.
Exactly.
You can meet a different demographic. You know, maybe people that
won't come to therapy
or may not consider it, you know.
Exactly. And then they go to the barbershop, and then that would be a way for me to provide them with the support that they need at that point.
Yeah.
Just won't call it therapy.
Exactly. No, but it's true. You're really good at that. And I like it when you do Pop's hair.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You do such a good job. Like, it does feel like barbershop quality haircut.
Oh, yeah. When I go to Boston, when I go back home, you know, Pop is already expecting me to cut his hair. And Pop, I know you're watching. I'm more than happy to do it.
Who do you owe your success to?
Appreciate that question. And so, first and foremost, you know, the Almighty, you know, the Most High, you know, God, you know, without God, you know, I'm nothing. So it starts and ends with God. And then after that, I would have to say, you know, my parents, you know, mom, pop, Kevin, Diogis, Cindy Diogis, you know, obviously, you know, you guys are my heart. You know, you're everything to me. So I wouldn't be where I am without you guys. I would say my parents, for sure, have been an inspiration for me and helping me be the person that you see today. And then let me see, am I forgetting anybody? I'm just kidding. You, my lovely wife over here, man. You've been my ride or die. You hold me down. You keep me sane. You know, you just basically just allow me to better myself. You help me to challenge myself to become the best person that I can be. You know, I don't always get it right, but you stuck by me. So I couldn't ask for a better wife. So I'm very grateful for God, for my parents, for my wife. Obviously, there's some other people that have helped me along the way, but definitely wanted to give a shout out, you know, to you guys.
That's very sweet. Thank you. So where can somebody find you online?
Beard and Curls. Just go to @Beard and Curls and you can find me on there. And so Beard and Curls, @Beard and Curls. I'm on LinkedIn, you know, places like that. You can find me online.
Instagram,
YouTube. We have the YouTube channel. So, you know, there's a couple of different outlets where people can find us.
Well, it was fun interviewing you. This was different, right?
Very different. I'm not used to being on this side of the chair, but we worked it out. Well, there you have it, folks. That's our show for today.
Thanks again for tuning in.
And as always, like it or not, Beard and Curls is the new his and hers.